Ever wonder what happens when curiosity meets real talk? You're about to find out. This is your host, Mike Lorena, and together we dive deep into the stories and ideas that matter most.
Audio Jungle.
Learning a new language isn't just about words, it's about expanding your horizons, enhancing your career, and connecting with people globally. Whether you're a language learner or educator, the Languages Pedagogy Podcast is your go-to resource for expert insights, innovative strategies, and practical tips to supercharge your language journey. Tune in now to sharpen your skills, deepen your understanding, and join a community passionate about the power of language. Incredible listeners, welcome back to another thought-provoking episode of our podcast. Today, we're diving deep into a fascinating topic that has shaped the way languages are taught and learned across the world: the evolution of language teaching methodologies. Whether you're a seasoned language educator, student of language, or simply curious about how teaching has changed over the years, this episode is for you. Language teaching has come a long way, and the journey has been full of innovation, adaptation, and shifts in philosophy. We'll explore how methodologies have evolved from the early grammar-focused methods to today's communicative, learner-centered approaches. So get comfortable as we embark on this journey through time, discovering how language teaching methodologies have developed and what each one has contributed to modern pedagogy. Let's begin at the start of our journey with the grammar translation method. Well, this method, which dominated language teaching for centuries, has its roots in classical education, particularly in the teaching of Latin and Greek. The aim wasn't necessarily to speak or use these languages, but to understand their grammar, analyze text, and translate them into the learner's native language. So what was it about? The grammar translation method focused heavily on rote learning of grammatical rules, vocabulary lists, and translation exercises. Reading and writing were emphasized, but speaking and listening were virtually ignored. Students would translate classical texts or passages, and much of the learning revolved around mastering complex grammatical rules and extensive vocabulary. So, why was it popular then? At the time, education was heavily based on mental discipline and intellectual training. The goal wasn't necessarily communication, but developing the mind through studying the intricacies of a language. This method was especially popular in formal settings, where language learning was tied to academic prestige, particularly in Europe during the 19th and early 20th century. So, what are the drawbacks here? As the world became more interconnected and communication across cultures became more essential, the grammar translation method's limitation became clear. It didn't prepare students to speak or understand a language in real-world situations. Many students found it dull and disconnected from actual use of the language. Let's jump right now to the next method, the direct method and natural approaches. Here a little bit of history. By the late 19th century, there was a growing dissatisfaction with the grammar translation method. Language educators began to realize that communication was the true goal of language learning. This led to the birth of the direct method, which took a radically different approach. What was it about? Well, the direct method sought to immerse students in the target language from day one. It rejected translation and grammar explanations, instead encouraging learners to think and speak in the target language And the classes were also conducted exclusively in that language, with vocabulary and grammar taught inductively, meaning students learn through experience and context rather than explicit instruction. The core belief here was that language should be learned in the same way we learn our native language, through speaking and listening, interacting in real-life context, and connecting words directly to their meanings without translating back to the native language. So why did it gain traction then? Well, the rise of travel, international diplomacy, and global commerce created a demand for spoken language proficiency. The direct method resonated with this shift because it emphasized communication, focusing on listening, comprehension, and oral expression, both of which were absent in the grammar translation method. How were the challenges here then? The direct method required highly skilled teachers fluent in the target language. The approach was also seen as lacking structure because it minimized explicit grammar instruction. Students sometimes struggled with more complex grammatical concepts, which led to frustration as they advanced in their studies. And despite these drawbacks, the direct method laid the foundation for more communicative approaches, emphasizing the importance of speaking and contextual learning. Let's jump to the birth of behaviorism, the autolingual method. Now, moving into the mid-20th century, we enter a period influenced by behaviorist theories of learning, particularly in the United States. The autolingual method emerged heavily influenced by both behaviorist psychology and structural linguistics. What was it about? The autolingual method took the idea of language as habit formation seriously. The belief was that language learning involved developing a series of habits through repetition and reinforcement. This approach used drills, memorization, and repetition to ingrain language patterns in the mind. Teachers would present dialogues and have students repeat them over and over to reinforce the correct structures and vocabulary. So in this method, language was often presented in set phrases and dialogues, and the focus was on accuracy. Mistakes were seen as harmful as they could reinforce incorrect habits. It was very much a teacher-centered approach, where students were expected to respond in specific ways and repetition was key. Well, here, what are the pros of this one? The pros here, the autolingual method worked well for teaching pronunciation and set phrases quickly. In the early stages of language learning, students were able to mimic native-like intonation and sentence patterns, making them sound fluent, even if their language use was largely formulaic. What were the cons here? Critics of the autolingual method pointed out that it didn't encourage learners to think creatively in the target language. This sounds like something is happening right now. The heavy reliance on repetition meant that learners weren't developing the ability to generate their own language beyond set patterns. Once learners moved beyond memorized dialogues, they struggled to adapt to new or unpredictable language situations. Despite these limitations, the autolingual method's focus on oral proficiency and repetitive practice helped shape modern language teaching by highlighting the importance of structured speaking practice. And here we go with the next one, the rise of the communicative approach. In the 1970s, we saw another significant shift in language teaching as educators began to emphasize communication over grammatical accuracy. Enter the communicative approach, which continues to influence language teaching today. So what is it about? The communicative approach places communication at the heart of language learning. Its primary goal is for learners to be able to use the language in real-life situations, rather than drilling grammar rules or memorizing dialogues. This method encourages students to interact, express ideas, and negotiate meaning. Grammar and vocabulary are still taught, but they are presented as tools for effective communication rather than as the main goal. Students learn how to function in the target language, how to make requests, express opinions, and ask questions in a variety of contexts. So, what are the strengths here? This approach focuses on fluency over accuracy, understanding that mistakes are part of the learning process. It emphasizes meaningful communication and encourages students to use language in creative and spontaneous ways. In the communicative approach, teachers play the roles of facilitators, guiding students through real-life tasks like role-playing, group discussions, and problem-solving activities that require language use. So what is the impact here? The communicative approach revolutionized language education by prioritizing functional use of the language over rote memorization. It helped learners develop the confidence to speak the language, even if they hadn't yet mastered all the grammatical rules. The approach also sparked a wave of new teaching strategies, including task-based language learning and content-based instructions, which focus on using language in meaningful context. Let's take a look now at the modern innovations. The first one here is blended learning and technology. So fast forward to the 21st century, and we're now living in a time of unprecedented access to language learning tools. Technology has opened up new possibilities for language teaching through blended learning, a mix of face-to-face instruction and digital tools. What is blended learning here? Blended learning combines traditional classroom methods with online and digital resources. For example, learners might attend classes where they engage in communicative activities, but they also use apps like Duolingo, Babel, or Rosetta Stone for independent practice. This approach gives students more flexibility and control over their learning. Flipped classrooms are another innovation, where students watch lessons or complete reading assignments online before class, allowing classroom time to focus on interactive activities such as discussions and group work. What is the role of technology here then? Technology has also made language learning more personalized. Adaptive learning platforms use algorithms to assess learners' strengths and weaknesses, tailoring lessons to their specific needs. Apps and platforms also enable learners to connect with native speakers across the globe through language exchanges and video chat tools, providing authentic practice opportunities. Moreover, we now have access to vast amount of authentic content, from YouTube videos and podcasts to online newspapers and blogs in the target language. These allow learners to immerse themselves in the language, even if they are thousands of miles away from a native-speaking country. Task-based language learning, or TBLT. Another modern methodology that has emerged is task-based language learning, TBLT. This approach focuses on task real-world activities that learners must complete using the target language. The idea is that language is best learned when students are engaged in meaningful communication to achieve specific goals. So, how does it work? In a task-based approach, learners are given a task, such as planning a trip, solving a problem, or preparing a presentation, and must use the language to complete it, rather than focusing on isolated grammar or vocabulary lessons. TBLT emphasizes the use of language as a tool for accomplishing tasks. The teacher's role is to provide guidance and feedback, but to let students learn through doing. This method mirrors the way we use language in real life, where the focus is on accomplishing tasks rather than following strict grammatical rules. So what are the benefits here? It encourages autonomy and problem solving. Learners develop both fluency and confidence as they navigate authentic communication scenarios. It also allows for differentiation because tasks can be tailored to the proficiency level and interests of the students. So, where are we headed next in the evolution of language teaching methodologies? While it's hard to predict, we can already see trends that suggest language teaching will become increasingly learner-centered and technology-driven. AI-powered tools and virtual reality may soon play larger roles in immersive language experiences, creating more personalized and authentic learning environment than ever before. But even as new technologies emerge, the core principles of language learning remain. The need for meaningful communication, cultural understanding, and human connection. Whether through traditional methods or cutting-edge innovations, language education will continue to evolve, adapting to the changing needs of learners in a globalized world. Hold on a second, before we just head to the next part here, I just wanted to remind you, new episodes drop every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so make sure to tune in weekly for your dose of thought-provoking conversation. You can find our show on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and our website www.mikeenglishonline.com. Remember to subscribe, rate, and follow us for more. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the evolution of language teaching methodologies. It's clear that every approach has contributed something valuable to our understanding of how best to teach and learn languages, from grammar translation to communicative approaches and beyond. The field of language education is rich with history and innovation. So if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with fellow language enthusiasts, teachers, people who just want to learn new languages, or anybody who's interested in these type of topics. I'd love to hear your thoughts on where you think language teaching is headed next. So feel free to reach out on social media. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep growing in your language journey.